In this second segment, we're going to look at the other part of the market for labor, in this case the supply of labor. And you'll recall that when we talk about supply of labor, we're really talking about the workers and how they react to changes in wages. The way we look at this is to make things really simple, we divide down a worker's time into two parts, work or leisure. Leisure here is obviously broadly defined. It includes commuting and being at home and being with the family and sleeping and fishing and all of that stuff. But just to make it easier, we just make this dichotomy between work and leisure. Let's think of the cost of going to the work and the cost of leisure. Well, the cost of work is the opportunity cost. In other words, what are you giving when you go to work? What are you giving up? Well, in this case, you're giving up the benefits of going fishing or spending time with your family or whatever it is you might do when you're not working. So the cost of going to work is an opportunity cost that of the enjoyment of taking some time off. If you look over on the other side at the cost of leisure, the cost of leisure is an opportunity cost, and it's the wages you give up where you could have been working but instead chose to take some time off. So if you go fishing or spend time with the kids or sleep or whatever, and you otherwise could be working, then the time you're spending at leisure has a cost, and it's the wages that you forwent, the ones that you didn't collect because you took time off. Now the question happens, what if wages rise? Well, if the wages rise, then the opportunity cost of leisure is higher, i.e. it's more expensive or costs more to take some leisure time. Now, given that, we can look a little bit more carefully at what happens when wages rise. Here on the left, we talk about a substitution effect, and that's just what we were beginning to get into in the previous slide. When leisure becomes more expensive, i.e. wages rise, and that makes leisure, the opportunity costs for leisure rise, then what we would predict is that the cost of leisure goes up, and so we'll buy or use less leisure. And then that usually means that we both work more. And if we think about it in terms of a supply curve, the supply curve becomes like a normal one we would think of supply curve going up and to the right. Higher wages would mean we'd work more because our leisure has become more expensive. There's an alternative explanation, and we see this in labor studies too, and that's this thing called the income effect. And here the general principle, if you will, is that for some people, if their wages rise and they were reasonably satisfied with how much total money they were earning before, and their wages rise, that means they don't have to work as many hours to get the same income. And so if you're looking at the income effect, then what would happen is that workers, as the wages go up, workers might actually work fewer hours because they can do that and still have the same take-home income. In this case, the supply curve bends backwards. Instead of going up and to the right, it actually goes up and to the left. Here's an example of how that might look. Actually, from labor studies that have been done in a variety of instances, we think generally, especially kind of within a small relevant range, we think generally that the substitution effect is stronger, i.e. the supply curve goes up and to the right. But at some point, when wages get high enough, then the income effect starts having more impact, and that's when the supply curve might actually bend around like this and go up and to the left. So a supply curve, if you looked at a full range of wages and so on, a supply curve might have this funny kind of backbending shape. Within a relevant range, like the difference between $10 an hour and $10.50 an hour, probably the substitution effect is going to prevail. Now, what can cause the supply curve to shift left and right? We ask the same question about demand. What can cause the supply curve to shift left and right mostly has to do with the number of sellers, and that means number of workers. You could have a supply curve shift to the right if more workers were given access to the marketplace. Maybe more people migrated into your city and had those skills and could work. or as has been happened recently, more and more as work can be outsourced electronically, then that opens up the market to more and more people in various parts of the country or various parts of the world who can participate in a labor market because they can do it electronically. So a supply curve can shift to the right if there are more workers available. It's possible also to have the supply curve shift to the left, and the best example of that is when you have some sort of restriction in how many people are allowed to work. This can come from a couple of sources. One is if the kind of work we're talking about here is very important or maybe especially health related, then there might be license or permits or other sort of qualifications that people would have before they're allowed to work. And if those are instituted, if there's actually new rules put in place requiring that licensure, then fewer people could work and the supply curve would shift to the left. The other thing that can happen is that sometimes there will be the arrival of a union, and specifically like a trade union, and trade unions in particular are known since time began to have a very tight control over the number of workers who are qualified. They have to go through apprentice programs before they become journeymen and so on. And so trade unions have successfully kept the number of their specific workers down in order to keep wages up. So that we've just now done a quick explanation of the supply curve for labor. Marry that with our earlier explanation of demand, and that gives us a background to consider all sorts of things that are going on in the market for labor.